considerably, many of them converts. Over 1/4 of the world's population is now Muslim, spanning for the most part the center line of the planet. It is very early on the first day of the pilgrimage, and the human flood into this hot desert town already seems endless. The multitude from all over the globe have come to Mecca in search of inner peace, a spiritual rebirth which Muslims believe is to be found here at the source of their faith. In a sense, all these people are returning home, being drawn as if by magnet to the center of their religion. Mecca is that sacred place to which Muslims should turn and pray 5 times a day, as the Prophet did. In the vast courtyard of the great temple stands the Kaaba, God's first mosque on earth. The circular movement the pilgrims are performing here is the Tawaf Qudum, the first of the rites which will dominate their lives for the next few days. Legend has it that the Kaaba was built by Adam, the first man, and later rebuilt by Abraham and his son Ishmael. The black canopy covering the Kaaba is finely embroidered in gold and silk thread, and every year it's replaced at a cost of £3 million. While more than 200 craftsmen set about making a new canopy, the old one is washed and cut into pieces to be sent as gifts to dignitaries all over the world. Weaving the new cloth on ancient hand looms takes most of the year. Each time, different verses from the Quran are embroidered in gold. These skills are handed down from generation to generation. Plains of Arafat, roughly taking the route, we're told, the Prophet took on his farewell pilgrimage. It's about 10 miles from the Holy City. Is going to shelter in a tent for a while with the children while they rest and say their prayers.
Yeah, what we're going to is Abu Rahman.
The pilgrims move on to say their midday and afternoon prayers in the Nimra Mosque at Arafat. No one wants to miss coming to Arafat for fear of nullifying the other rites and all the effort they've made so far. Like many thousands of others, Abdul Hafid sets out for the mosque on foot. He'll collect his family later on for the next stage of the pilgrimage. Many people think of the pilgrimage primarily as a journey to Mecca, but to Muslims there is no better day in God's sight than the day of Arafat. It's laid down in the Quran that God has called them to this barren place in the desert to ask his forgiveness for their sins. Normally, this arid tract of land is virtually empty of people. But it's such a sacred place to Muslims during the Hajj, they say the only real presence here is the presence of God. This rallying of men, women and children, regardless of nationality, race or social status, symbolizes the importance Islam attaches to the equality of all human beings in the eyes of the Lord.
لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. خد يا عم المنطق.
Then we shoot after Fajr quickly again. Try to get there.
After Fajr prayer.
Okay.
Mina is a tiny and normally uncrowded town tucked between two ranges of rocky mountains, but they've had to build some enormous walkways to cope with the human deluge during the Hajj. In the center of Mina, there are three large pillars. They represent Satan and lesser devils who are said to have tempted Abraham on this very site to disobey God's order to sacrifice his son, Ishmael. Abraham gathered a handful of pebbles and cast 7 of them at the face of the tempter, who promptly ran away. In effect, by throwing their stones at each of the pillars, the pilgrims believe they're also preparing themselves against temptation when they resume their everyday lives. The sacrifice of lambs, which follows, is part of Islam's great feast of Eid. It symbolizes Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. In the past, the sacrificed meat that wasn't eaten had to be thrown away. These days, the carcasses are kept in vast refrigerated warehouses before being. Pilgrim is approaching the moment now when he can begin to relax a little after his long day. Now the pilgrims are no longer required to be in a state of consecration. They can wash and change into brighter clothes. There's usually a big rush for the avenues of phone boxes the Saudi government lays on, so the pilgrims can phone relatives or friends to say they're about to celebrate the Feast of Eid. And that means about 5 million calls in one day. Now the final rituals in Mecca. The human tide moving as if magnetized by Mecca's holy shrine. And in the middle of it, the Kaaba, the physical center point of the Islamic faith. An ancient tradition tells us that Adam, the first man and the first prophet, was commanded by the Lord to come to this spot and build for him a house. Then Adam was told to move around it, as he'd seen the angels encircling God's throne. The Lord alone knows the truth of the story, but it explains the ritual being carried out here by the believers. The Muslim believes in one God. The same God is acknowledged by Judaism and Christianity. And the Prophet Muhammad, born here in Mecca, was the last of the messengers chosen for mankind's guidance. Therefore, his revelations, as set down in the Quran, are the words of God, unaltered and unalterable. And so Muslims believe these rites and rituals of the pilgrimage are by divine command. Whatever their race or nationality, those who come here for spiritual rebirth are one in the same brotherhood.
The Hajj puts life into perspective for me. I feel that I'm nothing, that I'm a drop in the sea of humanity, that I'm an atom in the creation of this universe. The good attributes, good sides, like patience, humility, I hope have increased a little bit.
Whether a person enters the community of Islam by choice, like Abdul Hafith, or by birth, there is an obligation to conform to the 5 pillars of the religion, which are the confession of faith, the 5 daily prayers, the payment of alms to the poor, the fast of Ramadan, and the pilgrimage to Mecca by those physically fit enough and financially able to undertake it. With the faithful of these days coming from so many different cultures, the pilgrimage serves as a reminder that Islam is a world religion, and whatever may be the some Middle Eastern countries, there is no ecclesiastical hierarchy in Islam, no ultimate doctrinal authority other than the Quran. The pilgrimage represents continuity between past, present, and future. And pilgrims need to go back in time to understand what life was like here in ages past.
The sight of the desert is breathtaking in a way. I just feel I'm on the surface of a planet. It's very barren and almost hostile. I wonder how people can live here, how people travel through these deserts without roads as we have them today. How would they find their way? How would they stand the heat? Or how weak have we become if we think how they must have lived with a few dates and a bit of water?
Long before the town of Mecca sprang up, when there was nothing here but empty hills and desert, tradition has it that here Abraham was commanded by God to abandon his wife Hajar and their son Ishmael. The water he left with them soon ran out. A terrible thirst was upon them, and Hajar ran to and fro, calling on God's mercy. The angel Gabriel then appeared, we're told, and struck the ground with his wing. A stream of water gushed forth over the sand, and it became a well. The Well of Zamzam, as it's called, is beneath the Holy Mosque, a natural spring that goes on producing the life fluid as it has done since time immemorial. It's regarded as holy water, the purest water on earth, we're told, which millions of pilgrims have used not just to quench the thirst, but as part of the inner cleansing process.
This is the water of the Well of Zamzam, from which millions and millions and billions of Muslims have drunk.
The symbol of God's light, the Star of Mecca, overlooks the area within the domed mosque where Abraham's wife Hajar ran in search of water. She rushed, it said, 7 times between 2 hills about half a mile apart. Here, the pilgrims follow in her footsteps, experiencing something of her anguish out in the desert. Today, the distance run and the ritual, which is known as the Sai, is enclosed along one side of the sacred shrine. Abdul Hafith, like all other men, must run between the 2 fixed points. His wife and the children can walk.
بالك يا أخي سعيد.
All the rites and rituals of the Hajj are over now. It's time for the pilgrims to carry back home with them the spiritual reawakening this journey represents. Before final departure, there's the opportunity to step into the reality of modern Mecca, the hustle and bustle of the souk, where there's a little something for everyone. For our family from Germany, it's been the richest of life's experiences. And as Europeans, they felt they were accepted by those Muslims they met who were born into the faith.
They loved the children. The other pilgrims found them beautiful and lovely. They were very astonished to see such small blonde children there, but they reacted very nicely to the children, and they called them Hajj Muhammad and Hajj Naima with great respect.
No one here is in a rush to get away, and even if you were, you couldn't. The exodus from Mecca is a slow process. In the past, there have been accidents during the pilgrimage, there have been tragedies, the loss of lives, but none of it can be blamed on the pilgrimage itself. Islam is a world of turbulent emotions, conditioned by the course of history in this region. All the pilgrimage can do is to make it possible for Muslims, wherever they live in the world, to come here in the hope of finding spiritual peace. Here, for a few days, they have all been guests of God.